Hey, everybody, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping, the official podcast of MarvelSnapZone.com. And it is patch day. It is that special time of month that we all anticipate and look forward to. And we've got a lot to talk about. So I want to jump right in. And as always, you know it, I am joined today by Lootmuncher. Loot, glad to have you on the podcast once again.
Hey, how's it going? I don't remember what number this is, but it's definitely strange being able to see you.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, Loot has been on the podcast the most times, but we just started doing video the last couple weeks, and so we both can see each other and laugh along as we dive here into the patch notes. So before we dive into the patch notes, I do want to quickly not that they're not as important, but I want to break down latest card and latest location. And then from there, we'll jump directly into the patch notes. And so I will just bring it up here. The new card this week is Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which is an interesting card. We've known about this card for a little bit because of Datamine, and an announcement of it coming out. So Negasonic Teenage Warhead is a 3-cost, 4-power card that reads, after any card is played here, destroy this card and that card. So this is not an on-reveal ability or ongoing. It's kind of one of those when this condition is met, something will happen type abilities. You can't shut off with Cosmo or with Enchantress, right? And the way I read it is like Negasonic Teenage Warhead has to have flipped, kind of like an on-reveal ability. They have to have flipped over, and then after any card you or your opponent plays at that location, that card is then destroyed along with Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Am I getting that all right, Luke?
Yes. So I was lucky enough to actually pull this card today. It was my first Series 5 card.
Man, nice.
So I've actually got to play around with it a little bit, but yeah, that's exactly what it does.
Yeah, so I've seen a couple people trying out a couple different things. I'm assuming you've tried it out at least a little bit today. What have you tried out first with this card?
So the very first thing I thought about with it is somehow figuring out where they're going to play stuff like the best. So the first thing I kind of tried was like a control deck with like lane control with like storm, because you can storm, and then if you storm into an empty lane, you can play her if you have priority, and then destroy if they're only trying to play one card into the storm lane. So that's very good. Or storm, and then like I also have Professor X in the deck, so if I Professor X, then I have 2 lanes to worry about that I could play the player in and destroy, their turn 6 drop potentially. I've been playing it a lot with Daredevil, which also seems very good. Being able to see where they're playing cards with 5. I haven't got the Dream yet. I've had the Dream in the deck, but I haven't pulled the Dream off yet. My dream is to have Moon Girl into Sarah into 2 of them and try to just bing everything. But yeah, it's been a fun card. I think it's very good. One thing that I didn't think about, but that I've seen now is that this is a way to get around Cosmos with Shiri, like Red Skulls and stuff, because you can play this into the Cosmos lane, and then if they flip that Red Skull over there playing into that they thought were going to get protected, it still gets blown up. It's not as protected as they think it would be.
That's a really good call. I did not think of that interaction, but that now you say it's like so clear, right? Because that doesn't. I guess that wouldn't be true in an armor lane, right? Because armor still protects from all kind of destruction in that lane. But Cosmo, because this isn't an on-reveal ability, would trigger still.
Yeah, so still safe in an armor lane, but Cosmos not as safe.
Yeah, so now those kinds of decks can't have that double protection, right? Where you have like one protection with the armor, one protection with the Cosmo. That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that sounds like a great tech card kind of situation where you can kind of counter that. Something that I've seen people try, which doesn't seem as successful as what you've said. In the streams I've watched people today, I don't have the card yet myself. Kind of the deck build you described was what I saw most successful, kind of a control deck. Things like you said, Storm, Professor X, and Daredevil, kind of anticipating what your opponent's going to do and locking them out seems to be pretty powerful. I saw people trying to try it with Nimrod, and I don't think it's not powerful. But obviously, you could place Negasonic Teenage Warhead down, anticipating to play Nimrod into that lane eventually. Obviously, that can be triggered by your opponent, though, if your opponent plays there first, right? I've seen people try to pull off like Negasonic, Teenage Warhead on 3, Shuri on 4, and then Nimrod on 5. So you got a 10 power Nimrod played into this lane, but it's contingent on you having all the cards, your opponent not playing there. It's a little tricky to pull off, right?
Yeah, I haven't tested it yet, but I have a weird deck of. I think when you were streaming the other day, I sent you the Cerebro 3 deck list. I've been messing around with a lot of Cerebro deck lists, but I actually have this list that I want to try out. That's a Cerebro 5, and getting her, I actually want to try her in it because I originally had Nimrod and Doctor Doom in the deck, but now with her being able to another easier way to activate my Nimrod, because before all I had was Armazola.
Yep.
But now having her will give another tool that I can use against my opponent. Like I said, just messing up their play, but also something that I can do to play it and then play my Nimrod on top of it and spread it out. And then the whole idea is that, and then like Doom or something to have a whole bunch of 5-drops with Cerebro set.
Yeah, and even there you could. Well, I don't know if you had this in the deck already. What's the 3-cost 5 power card that destroys the cards at your location?
The Deathlock?
Deathlock. I was gonna say Death Shot. I was like, that's not right.
Yes.
Deathlock, right? Like, because that's a 5 power card, so you could pull off kind of that double destroy on Nimrod potentially.
Yes.
Like, because it's a 3-cost, you could even throw Cerebro and Deathlock down, at the last turn if you don't have a Mystique in your hand, for example, right? To like pull off double. Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen stream titles that say Cerebro 5 or like YouTube titles that say Cerebro 5. I haven't like actually watched them enough to know if it's a viable strategy, but it sounds fun, right? So Cerebro, anything above 3 is always fun to experiment with, right? And see what's going on. Yeah, so I think this is an interesting card. I think we've already demonstrated kind of in our conversation, there's some versatility as both a enabler card for yourself, but also more of an offensive card against your opponent, which I think is interesting, right? I like cards that kind of give you that versatility that can open up different options for how you play. How do you think it stacks up against maybe some of the other recent cards you got? Do you feel like this is a more exciting one that more people are going to try to go out and buy?
I think it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to have to kind of see. I'm not sure if it's worth 6,000 tokens. Like I said, I was lucky enough to pull it. I hadn't decided yet if I was going to buy it if it did pop in my shop, but it hadn't popped yet. So I weren't worried about that. But I'm not quite sure if it'd be worth the 6,000 tokens.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. And something else from playing around with it a little bit already is seeing, there are locations to think about too. Probably the biggest one is Avengers Compound. Like they have to play onto it on 5. So if you have priority, that you are going to be able to destroy whatever they decide to play there or the first thing. So
yeah, I think there was also a data mine location today that's like you can only play in this location on turn 5. So
on turn 5, yeah,
things like that where you can anticipate if those are ever featured locations or new locations, stuff like that. This is going to be a great card that you're going to probably see play more heavily in those types of situations, right? And I also see this. I don't know. We'll have to see, but I envision this being a good card that people are going to want to put in like tournament decks, right? Or like competitive mode. It just seems like something that can be kind of that wild card or that extra secret sauce to maybe win you a game or two, right? Played in kind of the right scenario. So, time will tell as more people unlock it, but I definitely think this is middle to high ground, of some of the Series 5 cards we got lately. So, from here, let's dive into the featured location conversation, which is Asteroid M. And this is, at time of recording, this is going to go live, I want to say, in about half an hour. So we haven't had a chance, like we have in sometimes past, to actually try this location out. But Asteroid M is, after you play a 3 or 4 cost card, move it here. This is very interesting to me. One, because, sadly, we don't see a ton of move decks, right? At kind of the highest level of play in Marvel Snap. But I think they're fun and they're interesting, right? Like, I want to see them played more. So I think we're going to see that over the next 24 hours. But yeah, I'll turn it over to you. What comes to your mind here immediately? I mean, obviously move deck, that's the obvious, but what specific cards are you going to try to pull into here that are 3 or 4 costs?
Yeah, I think move is a very obvious choice. I mean, I think it will be a very good choice. I will definitely be playing move tomorrow to test it out, being able to get those free vulture or multiple man
Mm-hmm.
moves into it. Something to realize. I mean, it does go for move, but it could also go for other stuff too if it mattered. But like in a move deck, you could do like a Craven on two,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you play, I'm assuming it would work, but Hulkbuster onto the Craven should still move the Craven into the Asteroid M.
Yeah.
Because it works with us. Because I know I like to test weird things. I know that if you Hulkbuster something with an on reveal and then play Absorbing Man next turn, you get that on reveal effect. It
Yeah.
doesn't
It
care about
retains it.
the it doesn't care about the Hulkbuster in between.
Mm.
So so I think it'll be very interesting. Something that I was pointed out to me earlier was also that this is kind of like an Avengers compound, like we were talking about earlier. Like it's not necessarily you have to play everything on 5, but all your 3 and 4 drops are going to end up here
Yeah.
probably, depending on what you have, what can move around and stuff. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing. Another strategy, depending on what's seeing play, I think it could be interesting to play like a bounce bros deck with a bunch of 1 and 2 drops and stuff, so you can stay out of this lane. And your opponent, if they are playing, their Sherries and stuff, they are just going to move into this lane and clog up.
Yeah. No, I think that is interesting. Yeah, I think it's great to point out that it doesn't have to be move, right? I think that's definitely kind of the obvious where our brains go, but like there are other strategies you can kind of leverage of would it be great for this on reveal ability to happen here, but I actually want my card to go here for the stat line, right?
Mm-hmm.
One that is a move card that I think is interesting. Like I think the most obvious one is Vulture, right? Because Vulture's going to get that buff by moving over. But Polaris is interesting to me because it's like you can pull a card from a lane to another lane, but then have Polaris go here, right? So it's like you could be like, oh, I don't want my opponent's card here because I want them to lose the power there, but I want Polaris to end up there. So if they have like a 1 or 2 cost card in Asteroid M, you can kind of like pull it out and replace it. So switch out some power. So kind of a flip of power there. So I think that's interesting. I don't know. I guess I haven't tested this out. So things like Jessica Jones and Rescue, where it's like specific location, right? Well, you need to do something or not do something at a location. And I know they fixed things with this in the past, right? Where maybe like something happened at a location it was supposed to carry over, or vice versa. So I don't know like how that would work. If you play Rescue like at another location and she gets pulled over, do you need to play the card at Asteroid M or at the location she flipped up?
So I'm not 100% sure on Rescue. I know that was a problem before. I know that in this patch notes they fixed Jessica Jones with it. So they specifically say Jessica Jones in the bug fixes. But that is interesting because with it being fixed, you can play Jessica Jones somewhere else to maybe like trigger an Angela or something, and then have it move over, and then you could play another 3 or 4 drop next turn into another lane other than Asteroid M and still have it move over with Jessica Jones, but then Jessica Jones still get the buff because nothing was you didn't play anything into
it
Asteroid
was moved. It was moved,
but your card was still moved there. So
yeah,
you could do interesting stuff with that too.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting. Just on that note, I've seen more people playing Jessica Jones today, which makes me happy. I've seen some cards being played today that haven't been played in a little while as much, and that's nature of the patch day today, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting combos, right? When it's a certain cost card, like there's a lot of 3 cost cards, there's a lot of 4 cost cards, so there's really a lot of potential here, right? You can play around. There's things that probably doesn't make that big of a difference. Like if you're playing a Patriot deck and you happen to have some 3-4 cost cards that you're playing down, like I don't know if there's any that much of an advantage, right?
I mean, I guess it could matter for grouping on like tech cards and stuff, because if you play in the Patriot and the Mystique, they're both going to get moved here, so I can Enchantress both of them. You can't split them up in lanes.
That's fair. That is very fair.
Yeah, I think stuff like that could play a part in it for sure.
Yeah, I guess one strategy here is you're allowed to play cards here, so like you could try to plug it up so like your cards aren't forced over here, right? That's an option. So that's interesting. I feel like I just had one more that was piquing my interest. 3-4 cost cards.
Well, one I was thinking about
Miles Morales.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just thinking Miles is enabled by this, right? I assume.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be something good to just throw into decks because there's going to be movement in, probably 50% of your matches in the next 24 hours. So just having that one cost 5 power card, not a bad thing to have in any deck probably for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, definitely Miles, I think, could be good in it. And then something we were talking about earlier, I think would be good too, is if you think about, I think it could, once we play with this deck a little bit more, I think we'll see a little bit more how disruptive it could be also. Because what I was thinking about when you were trying to think of Miles was Cosmos, is if they're trying to Cosmo a specific lane because of like that location or something, it's just going to get moved over here. So
yeah. I wonder, I guess this wouldn't work like that because it's like your full turn resolves and then your opponent return. I just like imagine this like Cosmo flips on your side and like blocks them from doing something, and then it like blocks them at a second location. But that's obviously not how that'd work because their cards wouldn't flip over until after Cosmo had moved over. But yes, and there's no like double effect necessarily there.
I don't know how good it would be, but I did just think about the interaction of Storm another lane, and then it pulls Storm out of the flooding lane. I don't know why you want to do that, but
yeah, it's like, maybe if you like want the stat stick here, right? But maybe you have another plan there. But
if you already got like a sunspot or something down in that lane,
yeah,
because it could be harder it could mess with their plans of they're going to want to play something into the flooding area.
Yeah.
But if they're trying to play a 3 or 4 drop, it's going to get moved out of the flooding. So,
well, then I think I'm like, okay, I'm following this train of thought you're putting down, and I'm like, okay, you play Storm gets pulled over, and I'm like, well, then you could still Juggernaut, but then obviously Juggernaut gets pulled over too. So it's like, yeah, you have to have something there beforehand so it doesn't get pulled away. So yeah, that's interesting because you can't do your Storm Jessica Jones combo either. Like they're both gonna get pulled out of there. So yeah, this will be an interesting one. I'm interested to see what people come up with in the next 24 hours on this one. This one has me a little more excited than some we've had lately. I think there's a lot of playing around that's going to happen and trying out different things, and especially with a fresh off of a patch, right? People are already kind of going back and trying other deck archetypes more, and so the combination of these two things I think is going to create a fun week in Marvel Snap. Any final thoughts here before we move on?
Nope. I can't think of any other weird interactions currently.
Okay, awesome. Well, we are just going to play a quick ad break from our sponsor, and then we will jump back in. Hey all, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about MarvelSnapZone.com. Marvel Snap Zone is a one-stop shop for everything Marvel Snap on the internet. They have new articles nearly every day that cover deck building, strategy, card breakdowns, etc. They have a great collection tracker tool and a deck list builder that works off of that collection tracker so that you can know what decks you can build with your current card collection. They have guides and deck lists for all level of players and all collection level of players. Make sure to go to MarvelSnapZone.com and check it out now. Okay, we are back. And we are gone. Let me bring this back up. So we will talk patch notes. We've got plenty of time. I wanted to make sure we had lots of time to cover all the patch notes today because there's a lot to unpack. And we will start at the beginning as we do. I'm just scrolling up to make sure I have everything I want here. So patch highlights. I'll just briefly go over these, and we'll obviously what you see on the screen is one of the main things we're going to talk about first. So more tokens. They've made a change so that people who are not Series 3 complete will now earn more tokens. Like those of us who are already Series 3 complete, we're collecting tokens, so they'll be collecting at the same rate, which I think is a great change. The shop has been updated, and that they've split the token shop into two sections. One is for Series 3 cards. So for us that are Series 3 complete, as new cards come down to Series 3, this will be a part of our user experience as well. But you can no longer buy Series 3 cards with tokens, which I think is an interesting change, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in a second on that. But you do get a free one per month, which is interesting. You can pin it. It rotates every hour, like every 8 hours, like we're used to. but you can get one free one per month. And then the other section of the token shop is kind of what we're used to, same user interface, but it's just Series 4, Series 5, and the Ultimate variants that rotate through that. And they say kind of these changes are to promote people, getting more tokens and saving up for those 4 and 5 cost cards instead of buying 3 Series 3 cards. So I have some thoughts on this, but I want to kind of turn it over to you first, Loot. What's your general impression of these changes to the token shop? And especially I want to hear your thoughts on not being able to buy Series 3 cards for those users that aren't Series 3 complete.
So unfortunately, I can't speak to that too much. I am an early beta player, sunk a lot of time and money into this game. So by the time Token Shop came around, I was already Series 3 complete. I would love to hear more feedback. Definitely look me up on Twitter or something and let me know, because I like to know what other people's experience are with the game too. I think it's interesting. I do think that it's interesting that they are kind of going more, hey, save your tokens for these 4 and 5s that are obviously going to be very powerful cards that you're probably going to want. Save it for that, and we'll give you a free one every month for the Series 3. An interesting note, I am Series 3 complete, but one of the cards that dropped down from 4 to 3, Orca, popped for me, and it's my only Series 3 card. So I was like, I guess I'll claim it for free, which, I guess I would have done before opening boxes. It would have open for me anyways too, but still very interesting. I like I said, my first instinct is to like the change because it gives them incentive to save the tokens instead of feeling like it, but it does feel like it also takes away that choice they had of seeing which ones they want. Oh, I don't want that one, I'll pass on that one. I really want Death, or I really want Hella, really want to try out those decks or whatever. You taking that choice away does kind of suck, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You and me have both been, Series 3 complete for a little while now. And just as those cards kind of drop, we unlock them if we haven't unlocked them yet. But I think it's interesting because I don't think this would be as big of a deal. But the fact that they gave them the choice and then took it away, I think is where kind of that feeling comes from, right? Because if they never had the choice to buy Series 3 cards with tokens, if this was the first iteration we'd received in Token Shop, I don't think anybody would necessarily be complaining. And I don't say complaining in a negative way there, just, would maybe not have like frustration with the change. But kind of anytime you have freedom or choice taken away, obviously it kind of feels discouraging, right? So I've seen a little bit of discourse on that online. Maybe not everybody's feeling that way. But yeah, I understand that they're wanting people to kind of get more tokens and target these Series 4 and 5 cards and kind of get them sooner than later, right? Not waiting for them to drop all the way down. So they're iterating on this. They're trying to make it the best system for all players at all levels with their collection levels. So overall, I don't think it's a bad change. Kind of like you said, several cards dropped today, and I've been just kind of hoarding my reserves. I haven't opened a lot of reserves, and I think you were in the same boat, kind of waited till today to open a lot. So I actually opened Orca, Atuma, M'Baku, and Dazzler today. But I forgot that I was going to get a free Series 3 card, so I opened all my reserves before I went and clicked my free M'Baku, which was the one there. And then I saw it after. I was like, well, that could have been something else, but oh well, So now I'm Series 3 complete again, and I have to wait all the way till next month and the next drop before I can get another free Series 3 card. So it's a little hit or miss there. But overall, I think it's a positive change. More tokens in more people's hands is a good idea in my mind. So just kind of continuing on from here, we do have some audio updates for Thanos, Nimrod, Master Mold, Negasonic, Teenage Warhead, as well as new location sounds for Morag, Bar Sinister. I haven't. This always seems to happen, when patch day, I'm playing like a little bit during lunch at work or things like that, and I don't actually hear any of the new sounds. Don't know if anything stood out to you, or if you've heard the new sounds, or if it's just kind of gone over your radar, or if you've noticed anything with the updated sounds.
I have not heard any of the sounds. The visual effects I've seen, and then even a visual effect that's not listed here. But
interesting. So Thanos got a visual effect, which is really cool. Kind of does an animation with the stones, and it's cool. I like when they add things like that. Which one have you seen that's not here in the notes?
So real quick, have you played with Thanos since this?
No, but I've seen people do it.
Okay,
Like,
so
yeah.
it has the opening with him, but also each stone now glows. And when you play
Oh.
it, it has an animation where it shoots your deck with a beam of light, depending on the stone, showing you
Oh.
drawing the card, kind of like when you would play like on Lucia or something or Vibrating
Yeah.
Minds. So that's kind of cool. Uh, so I like that. It makes the stones feel a lot cooler. Um, and then the one that, like I said, is not listed here for visual. She-Hulk now has like a reminder or like a, hey, this is happening. Every time, like every turn her cost, you end your turn and her cost goes down, it like flashes and like makes a big ordeal about, hey,
Oh,
look,
okay.
the it changed. So I really like that. I really like anything, especially in play or in your hand. If something changes, I like my attention to be drawn to it, because you can
Yeah.
definitely, even if I'm playing battle mode for fun, but if I'm trying to do something and I can easily just like forget about something. So having the game like flash, I'm like, no, look at this right now. Like it helps.
Yeah, I think that's one of the advantages. I mean, a lot of us have played physical card games in our history with
Mhm.
gaming, right? Uh, but I think one of the things that's so awesome about digital card games is that like these kinds of things are very helpful, right? It's like this idea of like software can be designed in a elegant way for user experience, and like games can be done the same way, right? Uh, so I like that they keep iterating that and just making the game better and more clear and just more accessible for more people to kind of learn how cards work and make that obvious. And I just say keep it coming, right? I want more animations, more sounds, more indications, and I hope they never stop, right? I hope they just continue to iterate on cards that already exist as well as obviously new cards.
Yeah, I think they're always going to be working on that. I know that they are, hiring currently, but I know for a fact that there's two people that works on the visual effects, so they are turning it out as fast as they can, and I think they're doing a fantastic jobs. Every single one that comes out looks fantastic. The sounds are fantastic, so I think they're doing a fantastic job. But might take a little bit longer to get cards to roll out because it is two people working on it. But I think they're doing a
Yeah.
fantastic job.
Well, and something I appreciate, right? I appreciate that they didn't like wait to release Thanos until they had their future vision of like a visual effect done, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm glad that's not like limiting them, but perfect world, they have a unlimited staff and resources. Yeah, great. Let's all have those at launch, but it's okay, right? I'd rather have the cards sooner and then just bring us the goodness as time goes on, right?
Hmm.
So that's awesome. Well, let's continue on here to the bulk of what tends to be our conversation, and that's the card update. So now that we're doing video version of the podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube or on Spotify, we actually have the changes here, so that can kind of help you follow along as we talk about these. And the first one's Thanos, which actually has two parts. So Thanos has gone from a 6'11 to a 6'10. Thanos was originally a 6'8. So that's notable. They made this change as they were making other changes, a month or so ago. And so I think they kind of realized, hey, we didn't need to give him quite as much of a power bump. So they pulled him down one power, which I think is pretty straightforward. But to me, the bigger changes here is the Space Stone. So the Space Stone read before, on reveal, next turn you can move one card at this location and draw a card, to on reveal, next turn you can move one card to this location, draw a card. So instead of where you play Space Stone, moving a card from there to another location, you are now moving a card from another location to where Space Stone is at. And obviously, the kind of OP synergy we've seen with this is with Lockjaw, where you could put Space Stone into Lockjaw, and maybe you've already filled up your 3 uses of Lockjaw, but then you could launch Lockjaw into another location and put a bunch of more stones there and pull a bunch of more cards out. And it was just a very powerful combo. And this just limits that. Obviously, it still enables a movement of any card you want for one cost, which is still powerful, but it's not quite as powerful. But I'll turn it over to you. What do you think about these changes on the Thanos side?
Yeah, I really like this change for the Space Phone. Before I forget, the Thanos change, I do like that they realized that they wanted to keep it at 9+ power for the Shang-Chi. That wasn't something that you could do before. You had to see if they got Power Stone and pulled it off and made it go up to 18 before you could Shang-Chi it. But now it's always Shang-Chi-able, so that's nice that they decided to keep that in. And then Space Stone, changing it from the just moving a card over to basically like a mini cloak.
Yep.
I think it really changes the card a lot, and really helps because one of the things with the Lockjaw too, but just Thanos decks in general is the Thanos stones. They give you the so much variety and different abilities and different play patterns that you could do. And one that I know that I've seen a lot of people and I use myself with this is to move into a sanctum or a flooded zone from storm. Being able to move into zones, but then obviously another like very common and easy one is you could fill up that lane if you have one of those, or you could try to get lucky and pull it out of the lockjaw. But you can fill up a lane and then move one of those cards out and then play another card in. Or the big 5-head play is you fill up that lane and then you move the lockjaw into a clear lane, so then you get 3 more lockjaws triggers instead.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think limiting that versatility really will slow the deck down, and we'll probably have one of the biggest changes itself for maybe the next card we're going to talk about. But I do think this change, if they were going to change any stone, probably affects it the most.
Yeah, I'd agree there. I think some people were suggesting other changes. Some of the other stones, I think this was the real one to target first. I don't necessarily think any of the other stones need to change right now, but I definitely think this doesn't make Thanos weak by any stretch of the imagination, right? I still think Thanos is a solid card and can be built around, but it just makes it so it's not play Thanos or win less games, right? Continuing on here, we have Quinjet. So Quinjet before would reduce cards that didn't start in your deck by 1, but there was no mention of a minimum, which several other cards like Sarah, Zabu, these other cards that reduce costs of cards all have that text of, set a minimum of 1. Where this obviously had a great synergy was with Thanos, right? The stones, because they didn't technically start in your deck, would all be free. So everything we just said about Space Stones being changed is great, but also not being able to play 6 powerful 1-cost cards for 0 power also I think is something that will kind of balance out that deck a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Quinjet is the real the like nerf to the Thanos decks. Just the free power, playing the stones for free to then replace themselves and the lockjaw out. I think that was the real problem. Now, this is a change that I've seen and that I've been saying that I would like to see that they would do this change, because I've played a lot of card games for like 15, 20 years now, and 0 cost cards are very fun. They're always very, very fun, and they're always too strong. Like for the balance of the game, usually free cards are not good for the game, for the health.
Yeah.
And I think just for consistency, what you're talking about, Zabu says this, Sarah says this. I personally would like to see She-Hulk and Elysium say the same thing. That's just me. Maybe you call me the fun police or whatever, but I just think consistency matters. And like I've played Magic. I've seen free cards get out of control. So free cards can be a problem if they don't keep it in check. And I think making this change also just sets that for the future also, of knowing that maybe all cards with minimum, with reducing effects should have a minimum. But I think this is a good change for the overall health now and later.
I think that's a good call out. I'd be interested to see if they kind of go that path. Death comes to mind. Like Death's cost can reduce, but maybe if that could go from 9 all the way down to 1, right? So then, again, Death Wave has been a little to the side with things like Thanos and Shuri being kind of the dominant force in the meta. But I definitely think we're going to see a little bit more of Death Wave kind of come back a little bit. Maybe it doesn't come all the way back to the top, but obviously with those coming down, it kind of naturally rises. So I wonder if there's something like that in the future, right? Because a Death Wave with things like She-Hulk, right? You can definitely combo out some really powerful cards on the last turn of the game. And if instead of getting them down to like 0, for example, if they could just all get down to 1, still powerful, but not quite as powerful, right?
I mean, in that scenario, the combo still works. If you have She-Hulk in your hand and you have enough triggers on Death, if you wave, if they could still only go to 1, you could still play another card for 4, She-Hulk and Death. You still do the combo. So that still works if they wanted to do that change.
Yeah. So I think an interesting change. I still think Quinjet will work in some decks. Like a Devil Dinosaur, where you're playing a lot of Sentinels, things like that. There's still other great synergies. It just won't kind of overpower the Thanos deck going forward. The next card we are going to talk about is an interesting one, and that is Red Skull. So we've kind of talked the Thanos deck changes. Now we're going to jump over to the world of Shuri. So this is the first one here. Red Skull has gone from a 5/15 ongoing enemy cards at this location have +2 power to a 5/13 ongoing enemy cards at this location have +1 power. So just to add a little comment here, I mean, it says here in the developer comments, essentially, right, if your opponent's location's maxed out in the original card text, Red Skull would have 9 to 10 power. Or sorry, I should say 7 to 9 power, because you get -8 off of that 15 if they had 4 cards. Now it'll go down from that 13 to like a 9 or a 10. So it has less power to start with. So you could say, that's a nerf, quote unquote, right? When it's doubled by Shuri, now it's less. So that's a nerf. But if your opponent is clogging up that location, you actually net kind of a higher amount of power there. So in some ways, I think this is a very good balance to this card, because they didn't make it like strictly worse. It's just a little bit different, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think this has been the one that's been giving me the most trouble. And I've talked to a lot of people trying to figure out, is this a nerf? Is this a buff? Is this basically the same? Is this like a draw? Like, I think the only thing to tell is time. It's just people playing with the card, seeing how the meta shifts and stuff. This is one of the ones you're gonna have to get your hands on. Like, just reading this, to me, my brain doesn't work that way. I can't tell if this is a positive or a negative. So I'll definitely be interested in trying this card out and see how it plays out.
Yeah, and I played obviously some games today. I haven't matched up against a ton of Shuri decks. By no means do I think like Shuri is nerfed out of existence, like that style of deck. But I think people maybe kind of overreact sometimes when we have a patch, right? They're like, oh, I can't play that deck anymore because they changed cards in it. But I think as time goes on, like you say, I think we'll see, okay, how are people playing that deck differently now, and how does it stack up, right? Our next card, is sometimes in Shuri decks, but She-Hulk sees a lot of play in a lot of decks. So She-Hulk, the change here is just a 6/10 to a 6/9. Obviously, we've already mentioned She-Hulk a little bit. She-Hulk's powerful because of that cost reduction ability. Cost reduction is very powerful in Marvel Snap, where you only have 6 turns, you have limited resources. So this is just to make her strong, but not too strong. I mean, America Chavez originally had a 6/10 stat line, right? America Chavez came down to 6/9, and that felt like a really solid change. So this is similar. Obviously, I still think She-Hulk's better than America Chavez in a lot of situations. But I don't know. What's your take on this change? You think it's a good change?
Yeah, that's the first thing when I saw this. Like, they just gave it the good American Chavez change from 6/10 to 6/9, 6/10 to 6/9. I think this is going to be enough. There's one interesting interaction that I thought about was Scorpion. If you're holding She-Hulk and your opponent scorpions you, they can no longer Shang-Chi your She-Hulk. So it's a small interaction. I don't imagine that happening a lot, but it is a small thing to think about.
That's interesting, because that never really happens to your America Chavez, because you draw it on that last turn of the game.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
Not
something that really, not something that ever really affected American Chavez, but it's an interesting thing that can affect She-Hulk. But yeah, I think this should be fine. I think with the other changes that we're going to see farther down, and then the Red Skull and stuff, I think Shuri decks are probably the strongest decks. That's what I would say, like off my initial guess, without seeing numbers or results or seeing a lot of other play. But I think it's going to be a more manageable, more reachable height of the deck strength. But yeah, I think just adjusting it down to a 6/9 is fine. I think you definitely don't want to go to like a 6/8 and completely knock it out of the Shang-Chi range at all times. So
yeah,
I like this change.
Yeah. I think it's a good change. I like kind of the one stat up or down change as an initial change, and then if it becomes a problem down the road, they can obviously always make additional changes, right? Aero. This is one you and me have talked about a lot. I know this isn't the change you wanted to see, and isn't the exact change you were hoping to see. So Aero's gone from a 5/7 on reveal, move all enemy cards played this turn to this location to a 5/8 power up. On reveal, move the last enemy card played this turn to this location. So what are your thoughts on this, and why do you hate it? No.
Well, so completely unevoked when the patch dropped and they saw this, I had 3, 4, 5 people and more in private messages, but people like, sorry for your loss, condolences. Like
Rip.
people just feeling real bad for me. I even responded with like the on Twitter, the Loki gif from like Thor Dark World where he's just all disheveled and just upset.
Yeah.
But I actually, after playing with Aero, I actually don't think it's as bad as I thought. I think from playing, because this is what I've kind of been focused on. I've messed around with other stuff a little bit, but this is the one I've been focusing on since the patch. I was like, I got to find out if Aero is still good or not. And I think it goes in less decks now. I think a lot of people are playing in a lot of decks. To fight Sheeries and Red Skulls and stuff like that. And I think you still need those. But I think there are decks that makes this change more tolerable. Death Wave. You were talking about Death Wave, and I knew we were going to get here. So I think Death Wave is still a fine deck. That's been one of the 2 decks that I've been playing Aero with, and Death Wave still feels fine with what I said. Also, with the combo still works. You can still Aero, Death, and She-Hulk on the last turn after a turn 5 wave if you have enough death triggers. And so I think she's fine because you're limiting your opponent to probably 1 card also. And then the other deck I've been playing with is Sandman. And I think because they can only play 1 card, so I'm still moving that card.
Yeah, you know what's going to kind of be the result there a little more clearly. Yeah. No, I think it's right. It's hard when the things we love change, but I think this will be a good change. Like you say, you've had some initial testing. We're going to have to see how the meta shifts over the next week or 2. But I definitely think Aero is still playable. I think that's kind of the ongoing theme. I feel like with these changes, nothing feels so far, across our fingers, that nothing's been nerfed out of playability. It's just brought some of the strongest cards in the game slightly down like 1 step, so that hopefully, that goal of everything, it kind of raises everything up without buffing cards. We'll talk maybe more about that or lack thereof in a little bit. But I think so far I'm feeling good about the changes.
So real quick with the Aero, another thing I wanted to point out is I know that myself, I've been saying it for like a month now, and other people have been saying too, the change they wanted to see to Aero was just make it where it pulls in order. I think after playing with this card, it basically does that. It does make your opponent think about the order. They want that card that they don't care about getting pulled to be their last card. So it's still, it basically does do what we wanted. It makes you able to play around Aero and makes you think about it when you're playing into it.
That's a good breakdown, right? It accomplishes a kind of a design goal, if you will, right? That ability to control your opponent's card in like a one-off scenario. So you can kind of know like, hey, they have to play around this, and if they're only going to play 1 card, then it's like, then I have the upper hand, right? So I think that's a good call out. This one's a little interesting. So this is a Mystique, Absorbing Man, and Taskmaster. These cards now require the previously played card to be in play in order to copy its attributes. So I think this is an interesting change that I really hadn't thought of being a big deal. I think the one I want to call out on my end is Taskmaster, right? Because Taskmaster sees a lot of play in Shuri decks, right? Has lately. And so if you're playing Taskmaster to like copy a card, often you're playing that first card you're copying, but you either behind an armor or behind a Cosmo. So it's like not that likely it's going to be destroyed, if that makes sense. So I don't know if this is like a nerf to Taskmaster, because I think in a lot of scenarios you're still going to be able to pull off the Taskmaster. Maybe more of a nerf to Mystique and Absorbing Man, just because there's more. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's not that big of a deal to any of them. I don't know your thoughts.
I think it's more of a consistency thing. If you like with Mystique, if you like played an Iron Man or something and then it got Enchantress and then you played the Mystique, it didn't give the effect. But if the Iron Man got destroyed somehow, then the Mystique would work. So that's kind of like a weird inconsistency.
Yeah.
And I think that this fits with the inconsistency. I think this is the Taskmaster you're talking about. I think it's also a weird thing with maybe Galactus, because you're right with the armor or Cosmos with the Red Skull not getting destroyed. But if the Red Skull gets blown up, if you play it on 5, but they cheat Galactus in on 5 and blow it up, then before you could Taskmaster still get that power, but now Galactus stops that. You cannot get the power with Taskmaster.
That's a good call. So kind of a mini shadow buff to Galactus decks there, right? That's interesting. Yeah. So you make a good point. Consistency is kind of a key thing. We've seen them do that with card changes, right? It's less about like these cards are too powerful and more of, hey, people don't understand. I think they even say that people, so somewhat often gets reported as a bug. So this has obviously been something that hasn't been clear to people. People are like, I don't think it should work this way. And they agree. Obviously, we need to standardize this a little bit. We just have a couple more left here. Morbius. Maybe you can help me understand. I read through this one and the next one multiple times, and I still my brain is just dead, I guess. So Morbius' power no longer updates in hand or in deck, only at the location. So just based on how many cards have been discarded, it's just not going to show what that power would be in your hand, but it'll show if it's in play. Right? So that's
correct.
And maybe it says something here in the notes, because I don't fully understand why they're doing this. They said, okay, but we expect to add future functionality to Morbius and all cards with ongoing buffs to their own power that communicates their power in order to make these cards simpler to play with. I don't exactly know what that means. Right? Is that some kind of visual cue that's like, hey, this is not its true power, but it could be its power, right?
I think it's an interesting thing, and I'm assuming this is probably coming from a design point of in the future. Maybe they developed a card that cares about like the power in your hand or something, and they want to make sure that like cards like Morbius isn't affected and stuff like that. Because the one we get to in a minute, I think, is the bigger one of how they did it. Because we've already seen that. Like the other one is a specific card interaction that they did. So.
Well, yeah, let's jump over there. So Null's power still updates in hand, but no longer updates in deck. And
buff.
Yeah. So can you walk me through it? Because again, I feel like my brain is like just like hitting a wall. So walk me through this.
So the only thing that matters, what you need to know now, is Null now works with Mr. Negative. Before it did not. Now it does. While it's in the deck, it is a 6-0 at all times. So when you Mr. Negative, it is now a 0-6. And then when you draw it, you'll play it out. But before, it was updating the power in the deck. Because I was talking about this earlier with Super Tech God. We played a fun battle mode the other day, and he had a crazy Kang, Null, like crazy deck. And I was running like cable and stuff, like random generation cards. And I cabled a card from his deck, and it was an 8-16 Null. And I was like, why is this an 8-16? I'm so confused.
Because it got inverted
and with the power and So
that stinks. So that's awesome. I'm all for that. I love playing negative. So yeah, I'm gonna have to
now you can play some destroyed Null in your negative decks.
Oh well, there we go. That's a thumbs up buff in my mind. So thank you for helping me with that. I literally read this like 2 times. And I was like, okay, so what? Like.
And I totally could be wrong, but this is what I think, and people I've talked about, this is what they think too. So
yeah, well, something for us to go test out after we're done talking here. There's just one more card change, and this one's just minor. It's a text only. Widow's Bite. While this is in your hand, cards in your deck cannot be drawn. Is changed to while this is in your hand, you can't draw cards. I think they're just simplifying the language there, making it kind of a more simple statement. You can't draw cards, right? So if like somebody plays a card that's triggering you to draw cards, or if it's your turn to draw at the beginning of the turn, or a location, etc., like in none of those scenarios, if this is in your hand, you can't draw cards, period, right? No functional change, just a text change there, not much to say. I have another slide here, but I think there was something we talked about. Maybe there's some like kind of shadow buffs, and that Null change essentially is a buff in like one archetype. Right. But I think something that you and me talked about several weeks ago that we'd like to see kind of in the next patch is, we want to see more cards buffed, right? Let's bring the bottom of the barrel up to the top, or up to the middle, right? Things like Angel, things like Crystal, things, those kinds of cards that really see virtually no play, just aren't what we'd hope they'd be, right? You don't want to stick them in any deck, so it's like you get variants for them, you get the cards, and you don't really play them, right? So it's kind of a bummer. You want to, at least I want to be able to play every card in at least some kind of a deck, right? So I think that's something we kind of felt like we're missing this this patch, and so I included this tweet here from Glenn Jones from the team at Second Dinner. He says, "We have a plan. We have plans to strengthen a number of underplayed cards in the future. Stay tuned." Obviously, that doesn't give us a ton. I don't know if that's next patch. Is that in April? Is that May? Is that over the course of multiple patches? But I just at least wanted to call this out, that this is on the roadmap. This was in response, you can see here, to Krakenol. He was kind of asking this question in a thread of, why aren't we seeing the kind of these bottom cards brought up? But I just want to get your take again on this, Lootmuncher. What did you hope to see as far as lower played cards brought up, like cadence? Is that something you'd like to see every month, every 2 weeks? What would be your ideal for those kinds of situations?
So with this, I'm not a card developer, but I do try to use my reasoning skills to try to think like one sometimes, to try to figure this out. And something I saw really at a fever pitch this morning before the patch, a lot on Twitter. I posted like my guess at the patches, and a lot of the responses was, we really need buffs. Because I only focused on nerfs. I was at work. I was just trying to throw something out there, but they're like, we really need buffs. We don't need all these nerfs and like whatever. But first of all, we did need the nerfs. The nerfs that happened, we didn't need them. But from my point of view of trying to think of in Second Dinner's foot in their, what they were doing is you can't do too much at once, in my eyes. If you are making this many nerfs, you don't want to then make 6 buffs, because then the changes to the meta, was it the nerfs? Was it the buffs? What was it that changed? So I think doing all these nerfs, because I think this is a very extensive nerf list. Like a good amount of cards was touched. So I think doing that, letting the dust settle, then using that data, if the meta's in a much better place, then next patch, or patch 2 down the road, we can have those changes. And I think with this, I think this is a thing we said before, because I think my biggest concern with this patch is them not touching leech. And what my problem with that is it's fine if you don't think leech needs to be touched, if you think your other changes make enough. But we do know that from past tweets from Glenn, they said that their technology they developed to do hot fixes like broke, or something happened, so they weren't able to make any changes before a patch this time. So I don't know if it's still broke or whatnot. So my only concern is, if you don't fix leech now and it's that your technology still messed up, if leech is still a problem, then we have to wait 4 or 5 weeks to get a fix. So that's a little scary, that's a little scary to me. But with this, I think hopefully their plan is, and what I would like to see is, they get that technology fixed, and then every week or 2 weeks they could, all right, Crystal's not seeing play, and I don't think this would fix Crystal, but let's make Crystal a 4/5 now. Like let's see if that helps, or let's make Crystal a 3/3. Does that help? Like, I think they could do stuff like that with underplayed cards, where they could tweak stuff if they could do it as a hot fix instead of a whole patch. And more in tune. And then you can also fix those problems if 3/3 Crystal is broken. It's the most broken thing we've ever done. So let's revert that. Like, I think you can mess around a little bit more if you have that nimbleness. And so that's hopefully what I'm reading into this. That's what I would like to see, is being able to do it in the future. They have that technology and they can, change those. That's how I would like to see buffs go, is that you see these small changes to underplayed cards.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that you said something very wise at the beginning, and I always talk about how I work in software. If you change too many things at once, you can't find where a problem occurs, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're working on a piece of software and you put out 20 individual changes in one big bulk group, and then the software breaks, the customer calls, hey, it's not working. Well, then you have to go look at the 20 things, the bigger it is, the harder it is to find the root of the problem, right? If you can kind of push out one small change at a time, one a day, for example, on a website, if something breaks, we just pushed out something an hour ago. We know that's the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So couldn't agree more with you. Don't make too many changes, and then you can kind of see how that plays out, and then you can kind of make that next iteration. So I think that's a very, very wise kind of thinking of how things should be handled. We're just out of time now, but I just want to kind of get your last kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, or score rating, whatever you want to give it. How are you feeling about this patch? How excited are you going forward kind of for this next month with the current changes?
I think this is a decent patch. I would say I definitely would give it putting a random number, like a 7 out of 10, maybe like 6.5. You want to get technical. I think it did enough changes that I think it will shift the meta a little bit. Like I said, my biggest problem is Leech. I hope Leech isn't a problem. Hope if Leech is a problem that they can change it faster than 4 or 5 weeks. But I think the changes they did were good. I mean, I think the Aero change, I've seen a lot of people like knee jerk reactions was that this is a terrible change for Aero, but after playing with Aero, I really do think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to bring it down, and that's exactly what they want. Probably Aero was seeing massive amounts of play in lots of decks. It's going to come down 10, 15%, and then they'll be happy with it. That's probably exactly what they want.
Yep.
So yeah, I think this was overall a pretty decent patch, but definitely one that will tell with time, and we'll see.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Loot, as always, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We love having you on. The people love having you on. Want to give you that chance. Give a shout out. Where can people find you on podcasts, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all of it? Give us your shout out. Where can people find you and support your content?
So you can find me on Twitch at Lootmuncher, or Lootmuncher0, and then same thing on Twitter and Twitch. Lootmuncher0, and then Lootmuncher on YouTube, and I also have a podcast on YouTube with a couple of my buddies with Super Tech God and Valentine, the Marvel Snapcast. Check that out. Check out my YouTube channel. I've just recently started posting there the past couple of weeks, and something that I did at the end of last season, right before this season, was I put out a survey of 9 questions for the community to answer. And I was blown away. I wanted 100 answers. I got 257 answers. So that was fantastic. And off of that, I was able to break down and, the community's top 5 cards they wanted nerfed and buffed, what thought was the best card in each like mana slot, the best 1-drop or 2-drop in the game. And then also compiled the top 25 cards. And it's all voted off based off of what the community thinks. And it's definitely something I'm going to do at the end of every season. So at the end of this season, I'm going to do the same thing. I think it'll be cool to see the top 25 and all that stuff shift of from season to season.
Awesome. Well, everybody make sure to go follow Loot in all of those places. Make sure to check out that content. We'll be watching for that next survey later at the end of this next season. But listeners, thank you for listening. Wherever you're listening, if you could leave a comment, if you're able to leave a like, or if it's somewhere on a podcasting platform, make sure to rate the podcast to help us reach more people. And we will catch you in the next episode. Thanks.
Bye.
Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast written, recorded, produced, and hosted by Michael Thurman. Thanks for listening. Thank you.